of a milestone birth. Our program in a moment is about the arrival of a milestone birthday, 1/2 century. Victor Hugo may have said, 40 is the old age of youth, 50 is the youth of old age. Mary Frances Comer, who is a UU minister who is not far away, as I understand it, I think she's at Piedmont UU, writes this: "We are grateful to mark time with seasons, to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries, or to gather as family to remember our loved ones. In all these seasons, may we give thanks for the breath of life. Ever mindful of the fragile nature of existence, may we live fully in each moment, from spring to fall and winter into spring. May we gather in mystery and in the bonds of the beloved community. May we radiate love both within and beyond these walls, this day and all the days to come, caring for those we love and for those who we have yet to meet." So our presentation, I'm pleased to introduce Cinda Ebner, who is one of our own. Cinda has been a member for 7 years. She has a professional background in education, technology, anthropology, communication, and much of this infrastructure is Cinda and a group of dedicated experts brought us the ability to be both there and here. She turned 50 this year and thought it required a bit of introspection and exploration. She's here to share what she's learned. She'll speak with us for 20, 30 minutes like usual, and then we'll have Q&A. So please welcome Cinda.
Have a timer, Manny, so I am also going to try to stay on track. It's so easy to go off script and just wander. All right. Okay, so we're going to back up to slide the one before. There you go. Well, yeah, okay. There you go. So, hello, my name is Cinda. John gave me a great introduction, so I'm just going to move straight on from there. This is all about life stages and transitions, particularly that big giant one that seems to occur after age 50. You can go on to the next slide. All right, so in all honesty, I have a bit of trouble with milestone birthdays. I'm talking about those that end in 0. When I was a young person, turning milestone birthdays didn't bother me a bit. When I turned 30, it was the first time that I cried on my birthday because I turned a big O. I had no idea why. I was completely not expecting it. My husband, Andy, here in the front row, and I were camping on Animas River in Durango, if I have the right river name, at that KOA, and I woke up that morning and I was 30 and I cried, and I don't know what's wrong with me. I guess I felt a bit like I was grieving the passing of my life, my youth, but I wasn't expecting it. I always told others that age is just a number. That time, I didn't really feel like that, though. Next slide. For my 40th birthday, I was in the midst of learning how to practice gratitude, really learning it and practicing it on a daily basis. And we had already established a tradition on traveling on our birthdays, I think sort of to distract from the emotional toll of birthdays. And it's always been a great thing to do for us. I was at a beautiful castle in Italy with my husband and my 2-year-old daughter, Emily, who is right there. She is 11 now. And it was pretty easy to be grateful. I still struggled with the big 4-0, but I was learning to cope with it. I realized that was something I was going to have to do. And I kept telling myself that as our lifespans extend, so do our life stages. But nonetheless, time marched on. We can't travel now on my birthday because our girls have to take end-of-year testing right around that time. So this year, we traveled for the annual birthday trip a couple weeks early. I'll get into that in a little bit, but this year, my actual birthday, which is Tuesday, May 24th, was not a great day. It was the day of the Uvalde shooting. Oh, and we're having a disaster over here. So it was the day of this event right here. It was raining cats and dogs all day in Boone, and I just felt awful, mostly about the victims of the shooting, Ukraine, politics, climate change, and all the other ills of today's world. Still, I didn't realize just how hard turning the big O, the big 5-0, was going to bother me. But I began to worry that the big O was going to be more and more challenging going forward. I began to feel like birthdays going forward were going to be one big emotional disaster. My family can contest to this. I was kind of a wreck on my 50th birthday, like a real 5-alarm fire. I mean, at this time, you start to get these birthday cards. You start to feel invisible. That really does happen. And you start to get the old age jokes in a literal way. For those who can't see back there, it says, "The age fairy never gets to you. How do you do it?" And she says, "Just lucky, I guess." And the age fairy is tucked up in her behind. She sat on the age fairy. So, all right. And then you can most definitely identify with this pie chart when you turn 50. Your focus gets to be mostly on sleep, kids if you got them, work, loss of hair, gain of hair, and other unmentionables in that pie chart. All right, not just once, but at least twice in the last couple of months, folks have told me that studies show the happiest time in a person's life is in their 50s. After my experience turning 50, all I could think of was well, turning 60 is really gonna suck. Then my next thought is that we need a new framework to think about aging in the second half of life. Around the same time, I was lucky enough to listen to a podcast that got me thinking differently about birthdays, milestone birthdays, and life stages. This was actually a wonderful coincidence because during times of transition or stress, I always seek out advice, and I really felt like this was an answer to my calling for some solid guidance. And I'm a big podcast listener, so it really was just sort of a great coincidence. So thoughts to ponder. I'm going to share with you a little bit about what I've learned, and at the end of the presentation, I will ask all of you to contribute your advice if you would like to share as well. I think everyone has great things to say about this process, no matter what life stage you're at. All right, so here's the podcast that I listened to. It was a huge blessing. It was David DeSteno's program. It's called How God Works. It's on PRX, and the specific episode was midlife, leaning into the change. David himself had just turned 54 and had thoughts on that, and he wanted to talk to some experts about their thoughts. He spoke with Arthur C. Brooks, a social scientist and Atlantic columnist, and he used to be a classical musician, and that plays into the story today. And then Swami Tyagananda, sorry if I said that wrong, a Hindu chaplain at Harvard University and MIT as well, actually. All right, next slide. So, Arthur C. Brooks, social scientist and Atlantic columnist, discusses with David DeSteno the two intelligences that we should naturally move through in our adult lives. In this clip from the Aspen Ideas Festival, Brooks explains fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence within the context of how composer Sebastian Johann Bach was a perfect example of moving successively from one stage of intelligence to the other. After the video, we'll take a close look at what he means by fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence.
How did Bach move throughout his life successfully, notwithstanding the demand from the world outside him? Here's how Bach started out. According to social psychologists, Bach started out using what's called fluid intelligence. Fluid intelligence is what we think of as raw cognitive horsepower, pure brains. It's problem solving, it's innovation, it's working memory. Here's the bad news: it decreases with age, and it decreases before we want it to. This is your processing speed, my friends. This is the magnitude, how much RAM you've got, and how big your computer is, and how fast it runs. That's your fluid intelligence. And Bach was pure fluid intelligence for the entire first half of his career, innovating like crazy, coming up with new ideas, fertile. At some point in the middle of his career, as a matter of fact, in the last 20 years, he went to another kind of intelligence, which is described by social psychologists as crystallized intelligence. If the first kind is your Sherlock Holmes brain, this is your Dalai Lama brain. This is your accumulated knowledge and experience. So fluid intelligence is a flow. Crystallized intelligence is a stock. You know, nobody ever says, you know what your virtue is? Brains. They say your virtue is your wisdom. This is the payoff to a good life. This is accumulated knowledge and experience, wisdom and judgment. It's crucially, this is teaching ability, what Bach was doing. And here's the best part of all. Here's the good news of the afternoon. It increases with age. Here's what it looks like in the data. This is a graph that's going to look at how fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence change over the lifespan from infancy all the way to late adulthood. And here's exactly what you'd expect. Fluid intelligence increases and then decreases. Crystallized intelligence comes on later and stays strong all the way to the end of your life. So what do? What are you going to do with this information? Don't try to keep relying on fluid intelligence as you grow into old age. As a matter of fact, even as you grow into middle age, start moving on from your fluid, your crystallized intelligence.
Okay, so he said all that quite quickly, and so I'm going to just break it down a little bit and explain what he's talking about.
If you're trying to accumulate money, power, pleasure,
no.
and prestige, or fame, or
You can just close that. Sorry. Okay, so fluid intelligence occurs in your 20s and 30s. This is when you're highly productive. You're cutting edge of your field. You're writing for other cutting edge people in your field, and you're at the top of it. However, sometime in your 40s, that starts to decline. And then as you move into your 50s, you're supposed to move into what's called your crystallized intelligence curve. And that's distilling all that experience you've had, knowing what's important to focus on. Here, importantly, teaching others and writing for a much broader audience, passing on that wisdom. And the good news is that increases with age, and barring any other medical issues, that should continue to increase with age and always be something that you have available to share with others. This is another look at that curve, and you can see how fluid intelligence builds so quickly all the time. You're starting to crystallize some of that experience, building that wisdom. But sometime around now, and you're just starting to feel a little fuzzy-headed, it starts moving down the other way. And a lot of people in my age group, especially I think with COVID, we're definitely moving quickly into the crystallized intelligence phase. So, okay, and Bach's example, I love this because he was a prolific composer and performer in his early years, but at age 50, he decided to dedicate himself to teaching music to his 20 children. Not all of those lived into adulthood, but that became his focus. And he wrote a textbook so beautiful that it's still played today. And he was, according to Arthur Brooks, an example of someone who successfully moved from the fluid curve to the crystallized curve of intelligence, so he felt continually fulfilled. However, in our society, this is often, it's well portrayed in the movies. This is often how it actually works in our society. People just feel like they have to keep producing, have to be on the cutting edge. They work and work and work to be at the very top of their field. And for some people, it absolutely does work. But then you get those youngers that are coming up, and they're always starting to provide that competition. So this is where, if you aren't always performing at your very peak performance, especially if you have kids and dogs and everything else going on in your life, think about starting to move into that crystallized intelligence phase and sort of reinventing yourself. What can you do with all that experience and knowledge you have to pass it on to others? Come up with a plan. All right, next one. I went too far. Yeah, well, yeah, sorry. Let me get back to what it is I really wanted to say about this. I pushed my down button too long. Okay, yeah. Stepping off the fast track, however, doesn't mean having to leave the workplace per se. Brooks says that folks at this stage should be leading teams of younger colleagues, with every team member having a member age 60 or older, someone who has been there and done that to help steer them clear of mistakes and time wasters. Anyone who has had kids in their lives knows the importance of imparting upon those kids lessons learned. And in this day and age of ever-increasing innovation and change, and with the race to the shortest attention spans ever, finding ways to impart and pass on wisdom of experience is a challenge, but it's more important than ever. It's easier to sit back in ways to help guide the younger generations to understand the importance of morals, values, and the golden rule. Teaching history, lessons from history, spirituality, and how to live in a civil society is more important than ever. Nonetheless, change, says Brooks, is a fundamental part of life, and yet it is the thing we resist the most, and in some situations avoid altogether. We probably know people who avoided moving into adulthood for a really long time, and some of them are still avoiding it. So, aging gracefully is not just about accepting the fact that you're getting older and not doing anything about it. Rather, it's about embracing the stages and making the most of that time in your life, whichever time it is. Easier said than done, I know. Hindu tradition has one highly functional way of supporting these stages that's been around for thousands of years, something that we're kind of missing in this society or in Western societies. And this is what we're going to look at next. So on this first slide, you can see, sadly, many cultures, including our own, think of life stages in this way. Apparently, the first 50 years contain many stages of development and transitions, but then come 50, well, that's it. I should have my cane and I should be walking like this, because that is what almost every single one of these graphics that I found online look like. So let's move on to the next one. Here's one, quite unpleasant. Oh, wait, let's go back. So this one, all these different stages, cute, fun, lovely, old age. That lady doesn't look too happy. And then the coffin. That's pretty much it. And that guy, that adult, he looks like he's about 30. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. This one I found a wee bit offensive because apparently somewhere in your 20s, you're supposed to be wearing a ball gown all the time. I'm not really sure I get that. But my point is that there are so many stages, and then you just get to that one. We need more stages. We need more ways to think, to structure this whole second half of our life. This last one I'm going to warn you about in advance. I found it kind of offensive. We can go on to that one. Yeah, this one I didn't really get. This one is fine. The infant, the schoolboy, the lover, the soldier. I don't know what country this is from. The judge, the second childhood, which doesn't look fun, and this thing that says mere oblivion. I thought, this person may need to see a psychiatrist. All right, let's move on. So now on to this very jolly looking fellow, Swami Tyagananda. The Hindu ashramas is what we're going to discuss here. And he was interviewed by David DeSteno on this podcast about a better way to think about life stages. All right, next one. So first, I'm going to let him, do you have the file? Let him, it comes out the speaker's kind of bad. I apologize for that. The folks in Zoom should be able to hear it pretty good. The Swami is going to describe these stages.
So the first stage is the student stage. It's called a brahmacharya ashrama. The second stage is the garhastya ashrama, the family life stage. The third stage is called vanaprastha ashrama, literally the stage of going to the forest, what today we might call the retirement stage. And the fourth stage is called the sannyasa ashrama, which is literally would be the stage of being a hermit or renouncing.
Traditionally, that means from childhood to about 25, people should be focused on learning the skills that will help them prosper in life. In other words, the student stage. From 25 until 50 or so, it's the householder stage. You're focused on worldly needs and pleasures, building a career, taking care of your family, enjoying what prosperity has to offer. But there's a quote from an ancient Hindu text called the Law of Manu that says, "When your skin begins to wrinkle and your hair turn gray, it's time for the stage of vanaprastha, retirement, or the forest dweller." It's here, usually starting around 50 into your 70s, that you turn your desires away from climbing the ladder of success and begin to focus on more spiritual development and the sharing of wisdom. You're devoting your energies to helping others learn and grow, while you yourself focus on the more important aspects of life. Finally, it's the ascetic stage, the stage when you're literally preparing yourself for death, and in Hinduism, hopefully, a more auspicious reincarnation. These four stages aren't just labels. Moving through them in the right way, according to Hindu tradition, is a process of freedom and purification, and it's in that period from midlife through retirement that the transition to vanaprastha should happen.
So as David says there, moving through these stages is a process of freedom and purification. Body and mind are a prison house, so the goal of life is to see that moving beyond that prison is freeing. Making changes in our outlook and our lives should bring us to this goal. To this end, and I think this has to do with turning 50, I've been thinking about moving beyond the metaphorical prison of the body and mind to the soul everlasting. And so lately I've been thinking a lot about what the afterlife brings. I've been studying near-death experiences and after-death communication stories, of which there are thousands upon thousands on this site, the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, all freely available online. And I find them very inspirational to read, from both an anthropological but also an existential fascination. I look for commonalities behind the experiences as a way to help me understand what may lie ahead, to understand our purpose here and to find comfort in knowing that here is not all there is. And most importantly, I find what I'm learning from these commonalities and these experiences to be something really joyful. While I remain a bit of a skeptic on all things not scientifically provable, the other part of me feels deep down that there is surely more, and from what I've learned, it's definitely awesome. So, returning to Arthur Brooks, he sees our move into the third stage, or vanaprastha, not as a giving up, not as just retiring and going into the woods, but rather a purposeful move away or an unchaining yourself from the work, achieve, success treadmill that is so common in the earlier stages, to strategically find more balance in your life from a body, mind, spirit perspective. This includes realigning yourself with your friends and family, developing hobbies, wellness, service towards other, and developing whatever spiritual goals you have for yourself. He says that vanaprastha is considered the second adolescence, not a winding down, but a point of reorienting. And he believes that this means moving from that fluid intelligence phase to the crystallized intelligence phase. This got me thinking about the UUA, who has OWL, which stands for Our Whole Lives. It's a program that helps adolescents make informed and responsible decisions about their relationship, sexual health, and behavior. Not exactly the same thing I'm thinking about for the 50-plus set, but it does seem to me that if this is the coming of the second adolescence, it would be a really great service to our community to have a program, something like this, that does help us move through this transition, plan our goals and the things we want to do in the second half of our life. Turning 50. Okay, so David DeSteno, wrapping that up, you know, that podcast, I learned a lot. It was very inspirational, and it led me down this journey. And to everything, you know, he says in the end, to everything there is a season, and each can be beautiful if we are prepared for it. We need to change our expectations, step off that competitive treadmill, find ways to share our accumulated wisdom, turn towards spirituality, and engaging in service to others. All right, let's move on to the next. So I've got wisdom to share from other sources as well. I'd like to say that it's possible to live until 100, and I have lived half of that, and it was a very long, sometimes strange trip with lots of adventures. Looking forward to the next 50, it's not hard to give into the negative mindset, but that's it, it's just a mindset, and I know I'm preaching to the choir in this room. I also like to remind myself that turning 50 is a little bit like being reborn, and now I am 4 months old. I may or may not have the equivalent of another 50 years to live, but simply resigning oneself to retirement is doing oneself a great injustice. The difference now is that I have that wisdom and that experience, that crystallized intelligence, to know what I can do, that I can do what really matters to me going forward. While we have learned about some of the more academic and spiritual ideas related to aging, I want to look at some of our other wise elders. I am a Florida girl born and raised, so these wise elders include, naturally, Jimmy Buffett and Dave Barry. Let's move on to Jimmy. So in Jimmy Buffett's book, A Pirate Looks at 50, he says 50 is not just another birthday. It's a reluctant milepost on the way to wherever it is that we are meant to wind up. It can be approached in only two ways. First, it can be a ball of snakes that conjures up immediate thoughts of mortality and accountability. What have you done with your life? Or it can be a great excuse to just reward yourself for getting there. I instinctively choose door number 2, and so do I, Jimmy. Jimmy also had a bucket list of things he wanted to do by the time he was 50. I don't know about any of y'all, but I have managed to do a lot of these things or something like them. And I like that he has floss as the last one. My girls can attest that you're not going to wait till you're 50 to floss. You need to do it every day. All right, next one. And then Dave Barry, who wrote Get Shorty, he's also another columnist from South Florida, and he's a funny guy. And just here were some of his 25 things he learned by 50. There comes a time to stop expecting people to make a big deal about your birthday. That time is age 11. Next, nobody is normal. You should not confuse your career with your life. Super important. People who want to share their religious views with you almost never want you to share yours with them. He doesn't know he's a UU. Yeah, he doesn't know that. No matter what happens, somebody will find a way to take it too seriously. And finally, nobody cares if you can't dance well, just get up and dance. So my wisdom's pretty simple. So far, and this was it before, and this is it still based upon what I've learned. Stay active, stay involved, and eat lots of fruits and veggies. And I say from my grandma, you don't want to eat her fruits and veggies. She's been gone about 20 years. But that was her tip, was eat lots of fruits and veggies, and she lived pretty happily into her 90s. That was Emily when she was a wee baby. All right. Next one, and don't dwell on those negative cards. They are funny though. This one says, I'm not saying we're old, but I don't think we should stay in one place for too long. So having said that, you don't stop laughing when you grow old. You grow old when you stop laughing. Next. This one just made me laugh like crazy. Hold on, if I've got a suppository in my ear, where the hell is my hearing aid? And I've been calling you all day. That's a calculator. Yeah, I love it. The older I get, the less I care about what other people think of me. Therefore, the older I get, the more I enjoy life. And comments. What do you think about growing older and milestones, fears, and joys? What wisdom do you want to pass on?